Have you ever felt like your pain would never make sense? That what you experienced was just purposeless suffering? Something that broke you inside and made you believe you'd never be the same again? Today I want to tell you how my pain became the greatest testimony of my life, and what happened to me can, in some way, touch you too. Perhaps you're carrying invisible scars, marks no one sees but that weigh heavily on your heart every day. Perhaps you've come back from a personal war, whether a real battle or a silent struggle only you know about, and are trying to understand how to live again. Stay with me until the end, because what you discover now may surprise you and, who knows, bring light to what you're facing. When I returned, it felt like everything had changed, or maybe it was I who had changed too much. The streets that were once familiar now felt strange. The people who knew me didn't know how to talk to me, and deep down I didn't know how to talk to them either. It was as if the war had taken a part of me that I would never get back. I felt trapped in memories, trapped in pain that recurred every night, as if the past was always calling me back. Have you ever been there? Have you ever felt surrounded by memories that wouldn't let you move on? That was my reality. I wondered every day if there was still hope for someone like me. It was at that moment that I began to realize something important. Silence can be louder than any scream. I might have been surrounded by people, but I felt alone. I could hear the noise of the city, but inside me there was only an echo of what I had lost. It was then that I began searching for answers, or how could I transform so much pain into something that made sense? How could I look at what happened and not feel anger or guilt? This search became my mission, even though I had no idea where it would lead. And perhaps you're at that point too, trying to discover if it's possible to make peace with the past. Each step was difficult. Each memory seemed to pull me back. But it was halfway through that journey that something began to change. It wasn't all at once. It wasn't an instant miracle. It was like a small flame ignited in the darkness. First comes a breath of hope, then a conversation, then someone extends a hand, and suddenly you realize you're starting to breathe again, that you're starting to live again. What happened after that first step was something I never could have predicted, but it was precisely this that transformed my pain into testimony and brought me here today to share it with you. And that's where this story begins to take on new meaning. Because when we find a way back, no matter how small, something inside us awakens. It's as if the scars that once only hurt begin to tell a story that's no longer just about pain, but about overcoming. And that's what I want to share with you now. Because if my pain can transform into something healing, perhaps yours can too. And what comes next is the most unexpected part of this journey. Something that changed everything forever. And that can change the way you look at your own story. And you know what makes all this even more special? When stories like this don't just stay on screen, but become a meeting point for those who also carry their own struggles. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what has touched you most so far. It could be a memory, a thought that came to mind, or even an experience you've had that resembles what I'm sharing. Each comment is an opportunity to show that no one needs to go through these moments alone, and you never know who your words might reach. And if you feel like this message resonates with you in some way, like this video. It's a simple yet powerful gesture. Every like helps this story reach others who might need a sign not to give up. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now and continue following stories like this, which inspire, challenge, and remind us that there is hope, even in the darkest places. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people who need to hear this kind of message. So write in the comments, leave your like and subscribe, because what comes next will show how this unexpected encounter was just the beginning of a transformation that no one imagined. For a long time I carried invisible scars from war, marks no one could see, but which weighed on me with every step. They weren't wounds on the body, they were wounds on the soul, and those are the ones that take the longest to heal. When I returned home, I thought everything would return to normal, that all I had to do was open the door and see my family again for the world to make sense again. But it wasn't. The streets were the same, but they seemed distant. Hugs were sincere, but I felt like I was somewhere else. In the United States, where everything seemed so fast, so full of movement, I felt frozen in time, as if I were still there, on the battlefield, hearing echoes no one else heard. It's strange to say this, but as much as I wanted to be present, it felt like my mind had been trapped behind the scenes of what I'd experienced. Every loud sound, every distant siren, every news report about war was like a trigger that pulled me back. And no one prepared me for this. There was no manual explaining how to deal with life after everything changes inside you. The hardest part wasn't waking up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat. It was having to smile in the morning and pretend everything was fine. I carried a silence that screamed louder than any words. It was in this scenario that I began to question who I was now. The soldier who returned was not the same one who left. Before the war, I had dreams, plans, even a certain innocence about how the world worked. But the experience transformed me. And it wasn't just about pain. It was about seeing life in a way I'd never seen before. Suddenly, little things began to carry enormous weight. A family dinner wasn't just a meal, it was a reminder that I was alive, that a second chance lay before me. But at the same time, guilt haunted me. Why did I get this chance and others didn't? Why did I return and some friends remain only a memory? These questions haunted me every day. And in the United States, where there's so much talk about mental health, I realize there's still a huge stigma surrounding veterans dealing with trauma. People want to see you well, they want to hear that you're overcoming it, but few are willing to hear the hidden truth, that some days are unbearable, that some moments seem endless. I tried to hide it, smile at family gatherings, joke at Sunday barbecues, but inside there was a weight no one could imagine. It was then that I began searching for answers. I read books on resilience, listened to talks on mindset transformation, and found myself thinking about how many decisions we make every day that can change the course of our lives. I understood that I had a choice. Either I let those memories destroy me, or I began a journey to give them new meaning. It wasn't easy. Each memory felt like a closed door, but little by little, I found the courage to open one at a time. It was painful, yes, but also liberating. And with each open door came a new revelation about who I was and what I could build from here on out. I discovered that my pain didn't have to be a period. It could be a comma, a pause before something bigger. I began talking about it in small groups, first with other veterans, then at community meetings. And something incredible happened. People began to relate, began to share too. Suddenly, what had isolated me began to connect me with others. Loneliness gave way to a sense of purpose. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because there's something powerful in realizing that what seemed like your end can actually be the beginning of a new story. There's a real impact when we decide to transform pain into a path, when we choose to look back without fear. Every decision I've made has brought me here, and every revelation has shown me that there's something bigger happening, even when we don't understand it. This journey is still unfolding, and I want to take you with me on this reflection, because what you're experiencing now may just be the beginning of your own turning point. Write in the comments, "My scars speak for me." I want to know if this message reached you at the right time and if, in some way, it touched your own story. There was a moment when I thought I couldn't take it anymore. I would wake up in the middle of the night, my heart racing, my body on alert as if I were still on the battlefield. I would stare at the dark ceiling and wonder if I would ever feel true peace again. It was as if the world around me was functioning normally. People going to work, children playing in their yards, neighbors mowing their lawns. But inside me, everything was silent. A heavy silence, full of memories I couldn't erase. And this silence grew louder and louder, to the point where it made me avoid conversations, avoid places, even avoid the people I loved. In the United States, where everything seems so fast and connected, I felt disconnected from everything. Relationships began to fray. I was physically present but emotionally absent. My gaze was always lost, my patience short, and small noises, a car speeding down the street, a metallic clang in the kitchen, were enough to make me relive scenes I wanted to forget. This left me exhausted because it felt like I had to fight two wars at once. The one outside, which was already over, and the one inside, which wouldn't let up. There were days when I locked myself in my room and didn't want to come out, even though I knew my family was outside waiting for me. Guilt followed soon after, like a shadow that wouldn't leave me. I wondered if they would ever see me the same way again, if they could still trust me to be the husband, the father, the friend I once was. It's hard to explain to someone who's never been through it how trauma seeps into the little things. It changes the way you drive, how you react to a knock on the door, how you respond when someone asks if everything's okay. I'd smile and say yes, but inside, I felt broken. And the worst part was the feeling of isolation. Even when I was surrounded by people, it was as if there was an invisible wall between us. This barrier kept me from parties, family gatherings, and even simple moments like watching a baseball game on the couch. I wanted to be there, but at the same time, I wanted to escape. At times like these, I began to reflect on the hidden truth few have the courage to speak. that the weight of war doesn't end when the uniform is hung in the closet. It continues silently, shaping your thoughts, your actions, even the decisions you make. I remember standing in front of the mirror, staring at my own reflection, and trying to recognize who was there. I saw a tired man, but also someone who wanted to fight again. This time, not against enemies, but against everything that kept me trapped in the past. That was one of the nights I realized I needed help, that I couldn't continue facing this alone. Even so, asking for help was one of the hardest parts. There's a huge cultural burden on being strong, on enduring everything in silence, especially for those who grew up hearing that men don't cry, that soldiers don't falter. But I was learning that courage isn't just about going into battle. It's about having the humility to admit that you're not okay. And when I finally decided to open up to someone I trust, it was like a door had opened. It didn't solve everything, of course, but it was the first step out of that hole. It was the beginning of a slow, almost invisible transformation, but one that began to make a difference. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because these moments of extreme pain have an impact that goes far beyond ourselves. They shape how we raise our children, how we build relationships, how we see the future. They can harden us or teach us to be more compassionate. And that's precisely where the true journey begins, when we understand that every scar carries a revelation, that every difficult memory can become a turning point. This is the part that hurts, but it's also the part that gives us the chance to rebuild, to make new decisions, and to move forward with greater purpose. Comment below. My struggle has brought me here. I want to see if this part of the story also resonated with you and if, in some way, you identified with this point in the journey. It was that day that something happened, something I never imagined could happen to me. I was in a small coffee shop on a rainy late afternoon, one of those days when the city seems to slow down. I remember the sound of rain tapping on the window and the strong smell of freshly brewed coffee. I was lost in my thoughts, staring at the cup in front of me as if it held some answer, when a man I'd never seen before approached. He didn't say much, just looked at me calmly, almost as if he knew exactly what was going on inside me. He sat down next to me and began talking about his life, the mistakes he'd made, the pain he carried, and how one day he decided to transform it all into something meaningful. It was as if every word he said was directed at me, as if he somehow knew the weight I carried in my chest. That conversation resonated with me in a way I wasn't prepared for. It wasn't a sermon. It wasn't a motivational talk. It was a simple exchange, human to human, but it seemed to carry a hidden truth I needed to hear. He said something that echoed in my mind. You don't have to win this battle alone. That phrase hit me hard because I was so used to fighting alone that admitting it seemed impossible. But suddenly, it opened a ray of light within me. I felt that perhaps there was a way to give new meaning to everything I had experienced. When I left that coffee shop, the rain had stopped and the air felt different. It wasn't that the problems had disappeared, they were still there, but something had changed in the way I saw them. It was as if I'd taken the first step outside an invisible prison. On the way home, I realized that encounter had given me something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. It was a strange, almost uncomfortable feeling, because hope requires courage. It challenges you to get up the next day and try again, even when everything inside you tells you it would be easier to give up. In the days that followed, I began paying more attention to the little things around me. Little by little, I began to notice that there were people willing to help, that there were paths I'd never explored because I was too caught up in my grief to see them. It was as if the backstage of my life was silently rearranging itself, setting the stage for a greater transformation. And I began to respond to this movement, at first with tentative steps, accepting an invitation to go out, attending a veterans meeting, listening to stories from those also struggling to get back on their feet. These small gestures began to have a profound impact on my mindset. Every conversation was a revelation. Every story I heard seemed to show me that I wasn't alone on this journey. It was during this time that I realized that shared pain hurts less, and that when you allow yourself to open up, others feel encouraged to do the same. It was almost as if there was an invisible support network, ready to support you when you decide to take the first step. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because it was at that point that I understood something bigger was happening. It wasn't just about my own story, but about how it could connect with others. I realized that every decision I made from then on had the power to change not only my future, but also that of those around me. This was the turning point I never expected, the moment I began to see my scars no longer as marks of defeat, but as signs of survival. and it completely changed how I wanted to live the next chapters of my life. Write in the comments. My first step started here. I want to know if you've ever experienced something that seemed small, but completely changed the direction of your life. The healing journey didn't begin grandly. It wasn't one day when I woke up and everything was fine. On the contrary, it was slow, almost imperceptible at first, and that's why it's so difficult to appreciate. I remember the first time I walked into a therapy room. My palms were sweaty, my heart racing, as if I were about to face a mission. The therapist looked at me calmly and told me it was a safe place, that I could say everything, even the things I'd never dared to say out loud. At first, I remained silent, trying to understand if this could really work. But gradually the words began to come out, sometimes shaky, sometimes filled with anger, sometimes with tears I didn't even know I still had. Each session was like opening a drawer that had been locked for years. Some brought back heavy memories. Others made me laugh about situations that previously seemed unbearable. It was through this process that I began to realize that pain wasn't just an enemy to be defeated. It was also a teacher. It showed me where my weaknesses lay, but also where my strengths lay. I began to understand the triggers, the memories that brought me back to the past, and over time I learned to react differently. It wasn't quick, but it was real. Alongside therapy, my faith began to grow stronger. I remember nights when I would sit alone on my porch, looking up at the sky, wondering if God still saw me, if he had any plans for someone as broken as I was. It was in these moments of silence that I began to feel something different, a peace that didn't come from ready-made answers, but from the simple feeling of not being alone. Faith helped me rebuild my mindset, to believe that my story could be used for something greater than my own pain. The support of friends was another fundamental pillar. At first, I avoided contact, afraid of appearing weak or not knowing what to say. But when I started opening up, I realized that many of them were just waiting for a sign to reach out. We had deep conversations, some of them late into the night, where they simply listened, without judging or trying to offer ready-made advice. This support network was essential in making me feel less isolated. Knowing I had someone to call on the hardest days made all the difference. Reconciling with my family was one of the most emotional stages. There were apologies, long hugs, and tears of relief. I had to acknowledge that the pain wasn't just mine, that they had also been affected by what I was experiencing. This was a turning point because it showed me that healing isn't just individual, it's collective. When we decide to rise up, those around us are also touched by this transformation. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because this healing process has taught me that there is no finish line. It's an ongoing journey, made of daily choices, choosing to get out of bed even on bad days, choosing to respond with patience when anger knocks, choosing to forgive myself for not having all the answers. These seemingly small decisions have shaped who I am today, and each step I've taken has led me to realize that it's possible to find purpose even in the most painful experiences, that there's beauty even behind the scenes of pain, if we choose to look with new eyes. Write in the comments, I'm learning to rebuild myself. I'd like to know if this part of my journey brought back any memories or reflections for you. I remember perfectly the day I realized my first small victory. It wasn't anything extraordinary. There were no fireworks. But deep down inside me it felt like a major milestone. I'd spent weeks with fragmented nights, waking every hour, always alert, and that night I slept almost straight through. When I woke up, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Rest. It sounds simple, but for someone who lives with a racing mind and a body in a constant state of defense, it's almost a gift. I got out of bed, went to the kitchen, and for a moment I could smell the coffee and simply enjoy that moment, without being invaded by bad memories. Another victory was when I truly laughed for the first time in months. I was watching a football game with friends, and someone made a silly joke, the kind I'd normally ignore, but that day something broke loose inside me, and I laughed until I cried. It was strange and liberating at the same time, as if that laugh had been bottled up for a long time, waiting to come out. I realized that these small bursts of joy were signs that something inside me was beginning to align again, as if my body and mind were finally working together to give me back the life I thought I'd lost. Talking about the past was one of the most challenging steps, but also one of the most transformative. At first, the words came out with difficulty, laden with tension, as if each sentence were a weight I had to push away. But little by little, I began to feel that telling my story was a way to free myself from it. In group meetings with other veterans, I saw men and women sharing similar pain, and this showed me that there was no shame in feeling, that what I was experiencing was not weakness but part of a human journey. Each time I spoke, a piece of that burden was lifted, and I returned home feeling lighter. These moments may seem small to outsiders, but they were immense to me. They were like milestones, showing me I was heading in the right direction, even if slowly. Little by little, I regained my routine, returning to work, finding pleasure in simple things like walking in the park or listening to music in the car. Each step I took without being overcome by anxiety was a silent celebration. It was as if I were relearning how to live, building a new version of myself based on conscious choices and the decision not to let the past define my future. The most beautiful thing about this process is that these victories began to spread to those around me. My family started to see me smiling again. My children started calling me to play without fear of me being in a bad mood. My wife began to relax little by little, realizing we were moving away from that constant state of tension. It was as if the light I was beginning to see within myself began to illuminate the entire house as well. This is the part few people tell you. When you begin to heal, it creates a ripple effect that touches everything around you. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because these small victories are more than just moments of relief. They are signs of real transformation. They show that, even if the journey is long, it is possible. Every smile that returns, every good night's sleep, every conversation without fear of tears, is proof that life can still be good, even after everything. It's about rebuilding with patience, about accepting the good days and the bad, about realizing that you don't have to be the same as before to be happy again. And it's at this point that the journey begins to take on new meaning, because you begin to see that everything that seemed like pain can actually become the foundation of something stronger and more beautiful. Comment below. My smile is back. I want to know if you've ever felt that a small moment was a sign that something bigger was starting to change in your life. There came a time when I realized that keeping everything to myself no longer made sense. I had already experienced my first victories. I had already felt the weight slowly lift, and I realized it couldn't stop there. My journey had a greater purpose, and that purpose involved others. The pain that had once crushed me began to transform into fuel for something new. I remember the first time I told my story to a group of people who were also going through difficult situations. My voice trembled, my hands sweated, but each word I spoke seemed to release a piece of me. And the most surprising thing was what happened next. Others began to speak up too. It was as if my act of courage had opened a space for them to free themselves from silence. This made me understand that sharing wasn't just about me. It was about bridging experiences, about showing someone still at rock bottom that there is a way out. In the United States, there are many support groups for veterans, and when I started actively participating, I saw firsthand the impact a true story can have. Men who arrived with their heads down without hope returned the following week with a different sparkle in their eyes because they heard someone say, "I know how you're feeling," and that was enough to take the first step toward change. This exchange became part of my life, and each meeting was like adding a new brick in the reconstruction of who I was becoming. Deciding to tell my story in other spaces was an even bolder step. I began to be invited to speak at churches, schools, and community gatherings. Each audience had a different perspective, but the silence that fell when I reached the most difficult part of my journey was always the same. It was a silence of identification, of people who also carried their own internal struggles and found some kind of hope in my words. And this strengthened me even more, because I realized that my story was not a burden, it was a tool. It had the power to touch hearts and, in a way, heal wounds I didn't even know were open in others. There were times when I considered stopping, because recounting the past also reopens painful memories. But it was precisely in this process that I realized that each time I spoke, the pain lost some of its strength. It was as if I were drawing the poison from a wound and allowing it to heal healthily. And the more I spoke, the more I saw that other people were also beginning their own healing process. It was a kind of domino effect. My decision to speak made someone else open up, and that openness inspired someone else. This experience taught me that testimony isn't about showing scars. It's about showing that they can be overcome. It's about taking what once nearly destroyed you and using it as a tool to build something inspiring. That's why I decided to make this story public, so it could reach beyond the walls of support rooms, beyond private conversations, because I know there are many people going through exactly what I went through, and maybe they just need to hear that it's possible to get back up. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because sharing one's pain is an act of courage that transforms not only the listener, but also the speaker. It's at this point that the journey takes on new purpose. because it stops being just about survival and starts being about impact. Every time I tell my story, I remember where I was and where I am now, and this motivates me to continue helping others follow the same path, because in the end, what truly matters is how we use our experiences to light the path for someone still in the dark. Write in the comments, my story can help someone. I'd love to see who also believes that what they've experienced can become strength for others. Today, when I think about that low point, it feels like I'm looking at an old portrait that still moves me, but no longer defines my present. The after was born of many small, conscious decisions, not a single magical moment. In the United States, where everything moves quickly and the clock sets the tone for the day, I needed to slow down to hear what mattered. Waking up without jumping out of bed as if on alert, making breakfast calmly, taking the kids to school while talking about what they expected of the day, coming home and simply breathing, simple things that began to rebuild the foundation. The hidden truth is that life doesn't change when we win a huge battle, but when we find meaning behind the scenes. In the supermarket, in traffic, in the yard where I mow the lawn on Saturdays, in greeting the mailman, in the way I respond when someone asks, "How are you?" and I tell the truth of what I can accomplish that day. Relationships were the first reflection of this transformation. Before, I hid behind silence so as not to worry anyone. Today, I choose honesty with affection. I say when I'm tired, when I need a break, when a crowded place might trigger difficult memories. This transparency created security for all of us. My children began to understand that strength isn't about never crying. It's about recognizing your emotions and deciding what to do with them. My wife stopped interpreting my silence as indifference because I started naming what I felt and asking for help when I needed it. As a family, we learned to make simple plans. If the 4th of July fireworks are annoying, we have headphones on hand. If a big event is big, we arrive early and coordinate signals. It's participation, with respect for our peace. My worldview has also changed. Before, I saw the day as a minefield where any unexpected event could throw me back into the past. Today, I see opportunities to practice presence, listening without interrupting, saying thank you without ceremony, practicing patience with a customer service representative who's having a difficult day. The impact of this is greater than it seems. I stopped measuring value by the number of tasks completed and started measuring it by the type of person I'm becoming. This shift in mindset has altered the way I work. I learned to say I can't do it alone, to divide projects into stages, and to celebrate small milestones without shame. Efficiency without humanity exacts a high price. I've already paid that price. Today, I prioritize meetings that build, breaks that prevent extreme fatigue, and feedback that recognizes effort, not just results. Faith, which once seemed like a list of answers I couldn't find, became a space for breathing. I discovered that praying isn't about searching for the perfect phrase, it's about allowing my heart to slow down enough to listen. Many nights on the porch, gazing at the suburban sky, were my temple. I don't always receive explanations, but I do receive direction. Calm for today, courage for tomorrow, humility to apologize when I slip up. This spiritual dimension helps me remember that the journey isn't a straight line, and that starting over is part of the design. Feeling joy again was another achievement. It appeared in the details, the smell of bread, the silly laughter at the baseball game, the music in the car. One Sunday I noticed I was humming. I stopped and smiled. It wasn't euphoria, it was lightness. Simple decisions kept the inner house in order. Going to bed earlier, walking, drinking water, giving thanks for 3 things before bed. That's how the ground became firm enough to withstand the winds. I also needed to revisit my guilt. I carried a weight for returning while others faded into memory. For years, I tried to punish myself by living in the smallest possible space, as if I didn't deserve fulfillment. The turning point was accepting that honoring friends isn't about reducing life. It's about expanding it with purpose. I used what I know to mentor young people on decisions and character, to support veterans who arrive at groups with the lost look I once had, to participate in local initiatives that promote belonging. Serving now isn't about repeating war. It's about choosing a kind of impact that sows peace. Of course, there are still dark days. The difference is that today I have a map and tools. When a trigger appears, I don't fight it. I breathe, I identify, I choose. Sometimes I walk to the next block, sometimes I call a friend, sometimes I write a few lines in my gratitude notebook, sometimes I silence my phone and make coffee. It's not an escape. It's a strategy. They're the behind the scenes of my maintenance. These personal protocols remind me that setbacks don't negate progress. They just reveal where I still need to strengthen my foundation. And that's okay. The journey doesn't lose value because it has curves. I know that for those who knew me at my lowest point, this after may seem distant. That's why I like to explain it with simple images. If before I felt like a dark house with exposed wires and jammed doors, today this house has been renovated inside. The street remains the same. The number is the same. The mailman is the same. But the windows have been replaced, more light enters, and the structure can withstand the weight of storms. Does the ceiling sometimes drip? Yes, and I get the ladder and fix it. There's no shame in maintenance. The shame was pretending everything was perfect while the water accumulated. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because sustaining this state requires daily awareness. I plan with pencil, not permanent ink, to adjust course when life changes direction. I choose projects that align with my values. I decline invitations that stray from what I consider essential. I review routines whenever I notice signs of misalignment. I've learned that discipline isn't harshness. It's caring for what restores my life. And when doubt strikes, I turn to the anchors that have brought me this far. Faith, family, service, rest. They're simple, but reliable. Perhaps the biggest change is in how I see myself. Before, I presented myself by what happened to me. Today, I define myself by the choices I maintain. I am not the sum of my worst days. I am the man who decides again and again to respond with presence, responsibility, and gratitude. This translates into the way I drive, how I treat the cashier at the grocery store, how I handle a stray message. When I make a mistake, I ask for forgiveness. When I get it right, I give thanks, and I move on. If you asked me what the most concrete effect of this after is, I would say, practical peace. Not the peace of an ideal world, but the peace that fits within reality, with a busy schedule, bills, neighborhood noise, unexpected work events. It's the peace of someone who knows the storm may return and still chooses to clean up their house from the inside every day. This is the kind of transformation that endures when the spotlight fades. An ordinary life lived with attention, courage, and tenderness. Write in the comments, "Today peace makes sense." I want to know how this vision of the future relates to your own journey. If you're going through something similar right now, I want you to know that your pain doesn't have to be the end of your story. It can be the beginning of something new, of a transformation you might not even imagine possible right now. I know what it's like to wake up in the morning and feel like the weight is too much to carry. I know what it's like to look at the people around you and wonder if anyone truly understands what you're feeling. I've been there where each day feels like a repeat of the last and where hope seems like a distant concept. But I also know that it's precisely in those moments, when everything seems dark, that a small decision can change the course of everything. Sometimes it's not about taking giant steps, it's about taking one step at a time, getting out of bed, opening the window, taking a deep breath, and letting a little light in. I'm not here to romanticize pain, because I know it truly hurts, but I've learned that it can also be an invitation to look within and discover strengths you didn't know you had. An invitation to reevaluate priorities, to make peace with who you were, and make room for who you can become. The hidden truth is that suffering often exposes what was hidden: old wounds, expectations that no longer make sense, relationships that need to be rebuilt or even left behind. This revelation may hurt at first, but it can also be liberating. In the United States, it's common to hear about the importance of asking for help, but this can seem daunting when you think you have to figure it all out on your own. The good news is that help doesn't have to be a grand gesture. It can be a conversation with someone you trust, a call to a friend, or a visit to a support group. The simple act of putting your feelings into words is a powerful step toward breaking the cycle of isolation. And if you feel like no one around you understands, remember that there are people who have been where you are, and who today are proof that it is possible to find a way out of this maze. Another important point is that you don't have to wait until you're ready to start changing. Transformation happens in the midst of the mess, in the midst of chaos, when you're still learning to cope. I began my journey still hurt, still afraid, still unsure if it would work. But it was in this imperfect process that I found room to grow. Each small decision paved the way for the next. Talking to someone, seeking support, going back to doing something I loved, taking care of my health. This chain of choices pulled me out of the darkness and led me to a place of greater clarity. The impact of each of these decisions wasn't immediate, but it was real. And that's what I want you to take into your own story. Don't pressure yourself with a quick turnaround. Allow yourself to move forward at your own pace. There's a journey happening within you, even if it seems too slow. And every journey has behind-the-scenes details that no one sees but which are essential for the transformation to happen. With each step, you're building something, even if it doesn't seem like it. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because there's something incredibly powerful about recognizing that pain can be a teacher. It shows you what truly matters, teaches you to appreciate the simple things, teaches you to see beauty even on difficult days. And when you decide to listen to what it has to say, instead of just fighting it, something shifts in your mindset. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of what happened and start seeing yourself as someone capable of writing a new chapter. This is the revelation that transforms suffering into the seed of a future. Write in the comments, "My new beginning starts today." I want to feel that this message reached you at the right time and that you are choosing to take this step with me. You know, after opening my heart like this, I keep thinking about how each person watching this story is living their own battle, carrying their own burdens. Maybe you're silent, not telling anyone what you're feeling, or maybe you've already taken the first steps but still feel like the road is too long. That's why I want to invite you to transform this moment into a milestone for yourself too. When you write down what you feel, something begins to change inside you. It's as if the word becomes the first brick in the construction of what lies ahead. This conversation isn't just about me, it's about us. Every comment you leave here creates a space for encounter, a place where others can recognize themselves and realize they're not alone. It's incredible to see how stories that began in pain can become points of light for someone searching for a way out. And that's why I enjoy reading what you write so much, because that's where the message comes to life, where it leaves the screen and begins to make a real impact. So, if this story touched something deep inside you, leave a comment. It could be simple. It could be just one word. It could be a silent cry that you didn't give up. This isn't just engagement. It's a way to build a chain of hope that spreads far beyond this video. Each person who reads what you wrote can find the courage they were missing to take the next step. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because this movement that begins here can become much bigger than we imagine. When you decide to participate, you also become part of the transformation of others. And that's what gives meaning to everything. Seeing that pain can generate life, that history can generate learning, that vulnerability can generate connection. Comment below. My story matters. I want to see you be part of this conversation and transform this space into a place where every voice is heard. If you've made it this far with me, it already says a lot about the strength within you. It's a sign that this message has found a place in your heart, and that makes me very grateful. So here's what you'll do. Write in the comments, "I made it all the way," just so I know you walked with me until the very end. This space here only makes sense when it becomes a conversation, and I really want to read what you felt. If this video made you reflect, leave a like. It helps this message reach more people who might need just that push today. And if you want to continue this journey of transformation with me, subscribe to the channel. Here you'll always find inspiring stories that show that it's possible to start over, and that remind us that no one has to face everything alone. There's a video here that complements this topic. Click it and follow along. I'm sure it will resonate with you right now.